All right, 2.3. We're going to talk about finding information from a graph. So example 1 gives us a graph. The next page has questions with what it's looking for from the graph. So looking at the next page, these are the questions. For A, it wants us to find t of 1, t of 3, and t of 5. So the number inside is the x that we're looking for, and we want to find the y value at that specific x value. So for t of 1, going to our graph, when x is 1, what is our y value? 25. So t of 1 is equal to 25 degrees. Next, let's find t of 3. So we're going to go to our graph and look and see where x is 3. What's our y value? 30. And then t of 5. Let's go to our graph. Look and see where x is 5. What's our y value? 20. For B, it's asking for the same thing, but it says which is larger, t of 2 or t of 4. So let's find what each of them are. So if we find where x is 2, what's our y value? About. What's our y value? 34-ish. It's a little bit lower than 35, so we could say 34. If we go to t of 4, what's our y value? 25. So which one's larger? T of 2 is larger. For C, it's asking us for the same thing, but opposite. It says find the values of x for which t of x is equal to 25. So here we're looking at the y value 25. What value of x do we have when y is 25? 1 and what else? 4. Perfect. So we'd say x is equal to 1 and x is equal to 4. All right, next, it says find the values of x for which t is greater than or equal to 25. So again, let's go to our graph. Our temperature is 25 degrees here. Would greater than be above the line or below? Above. So what are the values for x to where t is greater than or equal to 25? So what are our values for x? But it also includes 1, right? Because 1 is at 25 and it says greater than or equal to. So 1 through 4, we're including all of this. So we would answer that in an interval. Are we including 1? Yes. So 1, are we including 4? Yes, so 1 through 4. Next, we're going to talk about domain and range. So domain, we look at the x values for our graph. So we look at the smallest x value to the largest x value. When we list our domain, it always goes from smallest to largest. So that would be from left to right. For our range, we look at the smallest y value to the largest y value. So range, we're looking at y values. Again, we go from smallest to largest, so we go from low to high. Next, we're going to talk about increasing, decreasing, and constants. So increasing, decreasing is when we're walking up the hill or down the hill. Just like how we read going from left to right, we read a graph going from left to right. So starting at the left, would I be walking uphill or downhill? Uphill until we get to B. Again, walking from left to right at B, would I be walking uphill or downhill to C? Downhill. So if you're walking uphill, it's increasing. If you're walking downhill, it's decreasing. It's important to note for increasing, decreasing, and constant. So increasing, decreasing, and constant. It is always parentheses when listing your intervals from increasing and decreasing and constant. Always parentheses, and we always look at the x values. So we only look at our x values here. So we'd be increasing from A to B, so we would say parentheses A to B. And then we'd be decreasing from B to C, so it would be B to C. And then we increase again from C to D, because we'd be going uphill, so increasing again from C to D. Let's do some examples. So here we want to find the domain, range, the intervals of increasing, decreasing, and constant. So domain, what am I looking at? The x values. So what is the smallest x value that my graph has? What would that number be? The smallest x value here. -8. Would it be a bracket or parentheses at -8? It would be a bracket because it's a closed circle. So bracket, -8. And then our graph continues, goes all the way. What is the largest x value that our graph has? 8, +8. Would +8 get a bracket or parentheses? Parentheses, because that's an open circle. All right, let's do the same thing for the range. Range, we're looking at our y values. What is the smallest y value that our graph goes to here?
5 or 6.
-6. Our graph goes all the way down here to -6. That's our smallest y value. For our range, we always start from the bottom and go to the top. Would it be bracket or parentheses at -6? Bracket, -6. What is the largest y value that our graph touches? 5, perfect. Would it be a bracket or parentheses? Bracket, because it's not an open circle. It's a closed circle there. It's an actual point. So we put a bracket. Any questions on how we found the range? All right, let's do our increasing, decreasing, and constant. So just like how we read going from left to right, we read a graph going from left to right. So I'm going to start at the left. A person, would I be walking uphill or downhill here? Uphill. So I'm walking uphill until this point. Remember, for increasing, decreasing, constant, we only look at the x values. So what is my x value when I start increasing? -8. And what's my x value when I stop increasing? -4. Perfect. So I'd be increasing from -8 to -4. And remember, increasing, decreasing, and constant are always parentheses. So we're increasing, and we only look at the x values. Right, at -4, I start to walk downhill. So I'd be decreasing until what point? -1, because my x value here is at -1. So I'd be decreasing from what to what? -4 to -1. And then at -1, again, we start increasing to what point? To 4. Our x value is 4 once we stop increasing again. So we are going from -1 to 4. And then at 4, we start decreasing again to what x value? To 8. So we'd be decreasing from 4 to 8. Do we have any parts of our graph that are constant, just a flat line, no increasing or decreasing? No. So constant would be none. So remember, for increasing, decreasing, and constant, we are looking at the x values. All right, so let's start with our domain. So domain, we go from left to right. What is our smallest x value that we have here? -8. Domain, you're only looking at the x values. So our smallest x value is -8. Would it be a bracket or parentheses? Parentheses, because it's an open circle. Now our graph is continuous all the way down here. We have an arrow here that points to the right. So what would our largest x value be? Infinity, because this arrow is pointing forever in the right direction. So a graph goes to infinity. Does infinity get a bracket or parentheses? Parentheses always. Let's find the range. What is our smallest y value that our graph goes to here? Negative infinity, awesome. Again, because this arrow points down in the downward direction, so negative infinity. What is the largest y value that our graph goes to? 5. Yes, open or close circle at 5. I mean, bracket or parentheses? Parentheses, because it's an open circle. Now let's do increasing, decreasing, and constant. So here, we're only looking at the x values. So if I was a person, I'd start at the left side of my graph. Would I be walking uphill or downhill? Downhill until what value? -2. So I start decreasing at -8 and I stop decreasing at -2. Then I start increasing here. Start walking uphill. So I'd be walking uphill from what to what? -2 to 1. Perfect, because our x value here is at 1. You're only looking at the x values for increasing, decreasing, and constant. So from -2 to 1. Now here we have a flat line. We're not increasing or decreasing. So I'd be constant from what to what? So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 to 4. So I'm constant from 1 to 4. Yes, you're right. I had them backwards. So this should be from -8 to -2. We're decreasing. And from -2 to 1, we're increasing. Thanks. I just wrote it backwards. All right, last part of our graph here. What am I doing at -4? Am I walking uphill or downhill? I'm decreasing. I'm walking downhill. So from 4 to what am I walking downhill? 4 to infinity. Awesome. So since I'm walking downhill, that would be decreasing from 4 to infinity. Because we're going forever in the right direction. We're only looking at x values here. A lot of people think, like, since the arrow's pointing down, that we go to negative infinity because we're going downhill, but we're only looking at the x values. We're going to the right. Our x value to the right is infinity. So be careful with that. Any questions? All right, last part, it asks us to find f of -6 and f of 5. So I want to see where my x value is -6. What is my y value there? So I'm going to go to my graph. Go to -6. What is the y value at that point? 2. Let's do the same thing with 5. We go to our graph, go to 5. What is our y value when x is 5? 2. Perfect. So you go to your graph, find the x value, and then look and see what your y is at that point. What about, let's find f of 1. What would f of 1 be? Awesome. We go to where x is 1 and go up to our y, which is at 3. What about f of -2? That would be -2. Awesome. That would be this point here. So at -2. All right, let's do the last one. So let's start with our domain. Domain, we look at x values. So we go from the left to the right. What's our smallest x value that we have here? -10. Would it be a bracket or parentheses? Parentheses -10 because it's an open circle. And we have to be careful because our graph has a gap in the x values. It stops where? -5. With a bracket because that's a closed circle. Where does our graph pick up again? -3. And then it goes to what? To 5. Again, because we have another gap. So it goes to 5. Would that be a bracket or parentheses? Parentheses, because it's an open circle at that point. And then where does our graph start again? What x value does our graph start back up again? 7. And goes to what? Infinity, because it points forever in the right direction. So it's pointing to infinity. Any questions with the domain? All right, let's do the range. Range, we look at y values. So what's our smallest y value that our graph goes to? What is our smallest y value, Diego? -4. Our smallest y value would be this point down here. -4. Bracket or parentheses? Bracket, -4. And then our graph goes up to what? What's our largest y value? 8. Because our graph goes all the way up to here. So 8. -4 to 8. Bracket or parentheses? Parentheses because it's an open circle there. Any questions with the range? Well, if you were to hold your pencil over any point here, so like here, yeah, there's a gap, but our graph still touches there. We held our pencil over here. Yeah, there's a gap on the right side, but our graph still touches there. So you would look for gaps, but we technically don't have any. Every point's accounted for. It goes down to -4 here. 1, 2, 3, 4. -4. So that would be our smallest y value. Because that's the lowest point that our graph touches. All right, let's do increasing, decreasing, and constant. So our graph starts, if we start from the left and go to the right, would I be walking uphill or downhill? Downhill. So I'm decreasing from what to what here? -10 to -5. So I'm decreasing from -10 to -5. Then I have a gap, so I have to jump across here to -3. I'm decreasing to what value now? To 0. Awesome, because our x value from -3 to, I stop decreasing here, but my x value would be 0. -3 to 0. Right, then I start increasing. So I'm increasing, I'd be walking uphill from what to what? From 0 to 5. Remember, we are only looking at the x values for increasing and decreasing. If you need to, cross off the y values. So increasing from 0 to 5. And then the last little piece is constant. What are we constant? From what to what? 7 to infinity. So 7 to infinity. Remember, increasing, decreasing, constant always gets parentheses, just parentheses. We're just looking at our x values there.
What if the little guy misses the jump and falls? What happens then?
All right, let's find our values here. Let's evaluate. So f of -9, we're looking for -9 on our x value, and we want to see what point we have at -9. So I go to -9, my point would be up here. Gabby, what's our y value when x is -9? 7, perfect. Now let's find f of 0. So I go to 0. What's my y value when x is 0? -4. Next, what does it ask for? 4. So we go to 4. What's our y value when x is 4? 2. Let's say that this question asked for f of 6. What would our y value be when x is 6? Handler, what is it? No y value, so does not exist. So since we have a gap in the graph, we don't have any y value here at 6. So there is none.